Hi folks, Slices here. I just want to do a quick introduction to this little knife here from George Wostenholm. Now this was sent to me from James at the Eggington Group, who the Eggington Group own the Wostenholm, the Joseph Rogers, William Rogers and Ibbison brands, all old Sheffield brands. Eggington themselves have been around 150 years or thereabouts. Wostenholm's been around a couple hundred years, and Joseph Rogers was as early as 1682, I think. The Wostenholm IXL logo trademark was granted in 1787. It wasn't actually granted to George Wostenholm. He acquired it a few years later, but their company still dates from around there. And incidentally, it's George Wostenholm, no L and no E. His actual name was Wostenholm with an L and an E, but he dropped the L and the E because they didn't. They wanted to contract the name a little to get it onto the tang of their blades. Apparently, certainly that's how the legend goes. But it's Wostenholm, not Wostenholm. Anyway, so they started coming in these nice little boxes. Back earlier in the year, I reviewed this knife, which is also an IXL Wostenholm knife. It's in a good level of polish. It's buffalo handles. The blade etchings, I think, are engraved rather than being stamped. I think because they used to be stamped, which I really liked. I can live with them being engraved. At least they're not laser etched on, so they, like this one, they should last a little while. But yes, this one came in a little box like this, and this is the way they generally come. Now, Arthur Wright knives come in just a little plastic bag, usually. If they're in a box, it's been done by the retailer, not by the manufacturer. These came in this. Depending on which level you get from tailors, you get a different sort of box, but their premier class knives come in a nice hard box like this, and that's that kind of set them apart in a way. So now this new knife came in this box. Now I believe this is one they're doing for most of their more expensive knives. This one is the most expensive knife I think they currently make, but even ones at around half the price are coming in these boxes now, apparently. So inside the box, I've opened this because it's painful watching me trying to open a cardboard box. A bit of foam on top, and then the knife sits in a custom cutout foam, and at the bottom it's got the IXL logo again. They're very keen on that, and I like that. I like a good trademark on a knife, and I like a company that respects its trademark. Now, this is what's inside there, and this is a really truly beautiful knife. You may recall that recently I reviewed a 5-piece Taylor's Eyewitness new design or revived design, and it had a similar type of Burl wood handle, which I said I think was probably the prettiest knife I'd ever seen. Well, this wood gives it a good run for its money. I don't know how well these things come over on video and film, but there's depth to that. There's real glow to it. The graining in it is just amazing. Now, I don't have that Taylor's one to compare it to because it was a pre-production model. It was just on loan and it's gone back. But I do have a Taylor's Barlow in a sort of similar poplar, stabilised. These are both stabilised poplar wood. I have to say, much as this is beautiful, this is beautifuler if that's a word. It isn't, but nonetheless, this is lovely, but it's much simpler and plainer than the George Wostenholm knife. But this does have, or does share with the Premier knives, a really high level of polish and finish. A really, really nice knife. Now this pattern, although it's newly launched, so that makes a very exciting time to be collecting modern Sheffield contemporary made traditional knives. So it's not a new pattern, it's just a revival of a pattern that appeared in a catalogue in 1885. It probably dates back even further than that, but certainly 1885 it was there, and they decided to copy it. Now it's a gunstock pattern. Now it is probably no secret that I don't really like the gunstock pattern. It's just one of those things that I never understand why you'd want to make your knife look like a gun. It's just, I don't get it. But I know it's big in America particularly. The gunstock pattern is big because it's guns. Guns. Not so much a thing in the UK, I think. Certainly. But that being said, that doesn't take away from the fact this is just a gorgeous little knife. It does sit in the hand quite well. The gunstock pattern is not purely form over function. There is it does work as a knife in your hand. Now, describing it, we've got a spear point blade, which is very similar to a much earlier Wostenholm knife that I have. In terms of shape, tang stamp, it's got a better sharpening choil than it used to have, and we've got a long pull here rather than the nail nick. And I think that this knife was actually quite a high level of polish once upon a time. It's kind of lost it over the period, but this knife, the new knife, is very true to the earlier pattern. You've got the IXL. In this case it was stamped in the blade. I think here it's engraved, but you've got exactly the same IXL George Wostenholm, Sheffield, England, tang stamp on it. And I think the other thing I really quite like about the tang stamps is that they used to put oil the joints, and this one has the same oil the joints. And please note, it's plural. It's always plural. You never see well, somebody will come up and show me I'm wrong, but I've never seen oil the joint in the singular on a knife tang. The only time I've ever seen it was on one of the Ben Belkin knives, and I questioned perhaps its origin, but I was slapped down. It was just as he put it, oil joint, because it was a single bladed knife. These are both single bladed knives, both oil the joints plural. I suspect that's because there is actually more than one joint, because you have the joint between this blade and this liner, and the other side of the blade and the other liner, and you've also a joint between the tang of the knife and the back spring. Anyway, so it's a spear point knife with a long pull. The stamps, as mentioned, it's a good kick, is slightly better sharpening choil than they used to do, which is, it's not necessarily something that's done well on traditional pocket knives, but this one I think is not bad at all. It does bring you just past the end of the plunge line there, so it should be okay to sharpen it up to, without ending up with a big smile on it or hitting the plunge line. But there is a sort of subtle swedge towards the point. Certainly it would appear to be more on the pile side than on the show side. I don't know if that's intentional or not. Now, as we move into the handle, the fitting between the blade and the back spring, very, very good, very, very clean. and there is no gapping down the back of the knife. I don't know whether the liners on this are dished or not. I suspect they probably are, which makes it's easier to get a better seal between the wood and the liner, but it makes it harder to get a better fit between the liner and the back spring. So I believe that they dish them, but I could be wrong in that. A number of modern companies, like GEC for example, and Rough Rider, they don't dish their liners. They just make sure that everything is super flat. It's all cut out with laser cutters or water cutters, and as a result, because the liners aren't cut out with tin snips and things, you can get away without dishing them because everything is so flat. But dishing them is a traditional way of making sure that you had a good seal between the wood and the liner, and often that means sacrificing the fit between the liners and the back spring. But you know, that's the price to pay. Now, the other things on the handle of the bolsters, we've got this lovely scalloping, pinch bolsters, and then there's the scalloping. We have got, as I say, this really excellent stabilised poplar burl wood. It's just phenomenal. I always said tailors get the best materials for their covers, and I never know how they manage to pip everybody else to the post, but on this occasion Wostenholm have excelled, really truly excelled, because that pattern is fantastic. This is lovely. Again, a poplar burl, a stabilised poplar burl, but you know, this is just phenomenal, so beautiful. And then we've got the end caps. We've got the IXL. It's pinned with brass pins. Presumably there's nickel silver pins in the nickel silver bolsters, but the ones in the handle are brass, and that brass goes beautifully with that the burl wood. As I say, the fit and finish is great. It's great all the way around. Even the end of the back spring there is beautifully cut off straight. Now, one thing, now this isn't a criticism, but it might sound like it. One of the things is, if you look at the bolsters there, or sorry, the end cap there, you'll see that it's not quite symmetrical. Now, it's not horribly, badly asymmetrical, but it is quite clear that this is a knife that was hafted by hand. Somebody actually held this in their hand against a presumably belt sander to shape it, and they did that by feel and by eye. And when you see the end result here, you can see that the end cap on the right hand side is very slightly more tapered and slightly more chamfered than the one on the left. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there's a fraction of a millimetre difference between one end cap and the other in terms of their length. Now, this is the sort of thing I actually like to see, because you know it wasn't CNC machined. You know that knife was ground by hand, and that's, to me, that's a very beautiful thing. That's what makes a traditional knife worth having. Now, I said at the beginning I'd try and give this as balanced a review as possible, and I'm going to say I do have one bit of hopefully constructive criticism that I would hold up to this knife, and I would suggest to Wostenholm that they consider, and that is that the knife isn't very clean. Now, it's very beautifully polished, but there's quite a lot of grinding dust. You can see it here in the logo, but it's also in the action, And the consequence of that is that it's cam tang, by the way, no half stop, which is fine with me. I don't really like half stops, but listen, clicks in, but not with any great verve. If I compare that to this earlier Wostenholm knife, much better snap to it, and even this lower priced, I mean, this was less than half the price of the gun stock. But this goes again with a good positive thunk. Now, I think it is down to just the final cleaning of the knife. I say the polishing was done beautifully, but flushing through to get rid of the rest of that grinding paste would have made it just perfect. So it's still a lovely knife, and I will clean it myself and see how it comes out, see how that improves the action. I had one very similar from GEC, a number 62, which had the main blade had a really soft action like that, and it was the same thing, just wasn't properly cleaned out. Now this can happen. I've noticed that it's happened on a couple of occasions with some of the newer Wostenholm knives, which is not a good sign, and I've had it with a couple of tailor's knives I got last year that were both a bit ucky, and as a result they had a poorer action. So it happens. It's not something that you can get very aerated about, but I do think at this price level that's something that should be attended to. And certainly if you spend the same amount of money on a tailor's knife, they almost always come very, very clean and with a lovely crisp action. This just has that sort of slightly dead action. Still works fine, and it is a lovely little knife, and I have taken the opportunity to use it for a couple of very small tasks like opening letters. It's not the sharpest knife in the book either, but it's it's not quite Arthur Wright blunt, but it's not Taylor's Eyewitness sharp either, so it's somewhere in between the two. Beautiful knife though, really like it. I'll do a fuller review with some of the history of both this knife, its origins in pre-1885, and in the origins of the IXL trademark and Wostenholm, and how it came to be part of the Eggington group, where it went in the meantime, because it's moved around a little bit. I mean, always in Sheffield, but it's been owned by different companies over the nearly 250 years, isn't it? 240 years anyway of making of knives. So anyway, that'll do for just now. If you like this stuff, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of this sort of stuff, then please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. And finally, thank you to James at Eggington Group for sending this along. It's a very generous help to the channel at the moment. With one thing and another, I'm not in a position to be buying knives, so when somebody sends me something, it is very helpful. But like I say, I try not to be swayed by the fact that it was free, and try and give it as balanced a review as possible. If anybody thinks I'm not, or that there seems to be an undue making undue allowances or whatever, please call me up on it. Point it out in the comments, because my aim is to be objective. I'm not pandering to a manufacturer's whims. I'm not just becoming an influencer, YouTube influencer. This is a knife that I have tried to review in as objectively as possible, and it's a thing of real beauty. So it's difficult to not be enthused by it. It really is, because it is a lovely knife. It's well made, nicely packaged, it's not over the top, nicely done, very smart, and see, that wood is just absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you're still here after 20 minutes, that's amazing. Thank you. Okay, we'll see you again soon. Bye.